How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, I was doing some research last night about our Haitian brothers and sisters. I didn't want to just leave us hanging by reporting, just one time about what was going on. I have a tendency to go back and backtrack because I want to keep us abreast. And I got a series of videos. Some of the stuff is maybe a little bit old, but it gives us a fuller view and a picture of what's going on. We know that the Haitians have never been treated right, and we know why. Because they black folks, they of a darker hue. And anytime you see folks with dark skin, the racism really stands out quite deep. And what I'm going to present will show what folks were saying long before Biden was elected, his racism or his unquote isms. So we got a journey to go on, my royal family. So let's get into it.
As we reported, Daniel Foote, who is the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti, resigned in protest today, putting the spotlight again on the Biden administration's handling of mostly Haitian migrants in Del Rio, Texas. Our own Yamiche Alcindor broke the story of the Special Envoy's resignation, and she joins me now. So, Yamiche, hello. What more do we know about his decision? What was behind it?
Well, the former Special Envoy to Haiti, Daniel Foote, essentially said that he didn't have a voice in this administration. He said that he was ignored. He also said he didn't want to be connected to what he saw as cruel and inhumane policies. He said that it was wrong to be deporting Haitians back to Haiti because that island nation is facing a number of crises, including the aftermath of political turmoil of the assassination of the president, as well as an earthquake that hit the country last month. I want to read part of Daniel Foote's letter because it was a blistering letter. It said in part, "I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees. The collapsed state," and he's referring to Haiti, "is unable to provide security or basic services, or more refugees will fuel further desperation and crime." So there he is saying that Haiti is actually being harmed by us sending back, the United States sending back Haitian migrants. He also said that the United States shouldn't be supporting and backing the current Prime Minister of Haiti, Ariel Henry, saying instead that the United States should be working with civil society, which is something that we've told our viewers over and over again, which is what the civil society has been pleading with the Biden administration to do. That said, officials in the Biden administration have been pushing back very hard on Daniel Foote. They've been saying that his allegations are false, that he's miscategorizing why he's resigning. The Secretary of State, as well as the Deputy Secretary of State, the White House press secretary, they all say that his views were valued, they were heard, they just were not followed through. I also spoke to a senior administration official who said Daniel Foote never actually raised objections to Haitians being deported or to their treatment on the border. That being said, that's something that, of course, Daniel Foote takes issue with.
And Yamiche, you were telling us you've also been in touch with a number of Haitian leaders, Haitian activists who've been very critical of the Biden administration's response to all this. What are they saying, and what is the administration saying to that?
Well, there is a lot of outrage. People are saying that this is cruel, the way that the United States is treating Haitian migrants. I talked to one activist. His name is Alix Delsumet. He's a councilman in North Miami, Florida, and he's also the chairman of the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network. Here's what he had to say.
They need to find a solution for those who are trying to get here, to treat them fairly. We don't know what's the difference between this administration and the previous administration. So this is not what I think anyone has signed up for.
He also said that President Biden's silence on this speaks volumes. And I pushed the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, on this specific issue on President Biden not speaking out. Here's what she said.
Why is he not using that bully pulpit to speak out forcefully himself on the treatment of Haitians? his point of view is also reflected in the actions that have been taken through the administration, including the investigation, including the change in policy. The Secretary of Homeland Security oversees these efforts and has been quite outspoken and quite visible on what steps we should take moving forward. And he certainly may still speak to it.
So that was the White House press secretary talking about a number of changing policies. Part of the policies that change it is that the Department of Homeland Security has now launched an investigation into those images of Border Patrol agents on horseback using reins against migrants. They're also suspending right now the Horse Patrol unit in Del Rio, Texas. So that is a big change that they announced today. That being said, activists want to see so much more done.
Really interesting. Finally, Yamiche, what is known about what's going on right now at that Del Rio crossing in Texas, where many of these migrants still are, and what happens next?
There, at its peak, the migrant camp was at 14,000 people living in squalid conditions with no food, with very little access to water. Now it's down to about 3,000 or 4,000 people, officials say. They also say, though, that deportations are going to continue. These repatriation flights, there have been 13 of them to Haiti so far, that they're going to continue because of Title 42, which is a Trump-era law connected to public health. That being said, the administration has also said that some families, some young children, some pregnant women, that they're going to be allowed to stay in the United States. And sources tell me that the majority of these migrants are actually being allowed to stay in the United States now. But we'll have to watch to see if there's any other policy changes, because activists are saying the way that some of these migrants are being treated, they're being treated like slaves, they say. And that's, of course, a big accusation, but it's an accusation made out of passion and outrage.
Such a fast-moving story, and I know you are continuing to stay on top of it. Yamiche, thank you very much.
Oh, it's so much deeper than that, my royal family. It is much, much, much deeper. Let me cut this off. Oh, it's so much deeper, my royal family. We will be getting into Title 42 in a bit. But I'm going to take this down, and we're going to continue on.
Texas is gearing up for what could be its largest surge at the border, as 60,000 migrants are expected to reach the state within just the next few weeks. One former border official sounding the alarm on where they're coming from and what's driving them to the U.S.
The result of that is the message goes out, and then instead of having a couple of hundred encounters a day, we quickly went up to about 6,000. A little bit of the misleading messaging in the public today too is they think this is just Mexico or South America. Border Patrol caught people from 150 different countries coming through Mexico into the United States. The real thing that's changed is the focus on border security in general and acknowledging that border security is critical to Homeland Security. The messaging has changed.
Thomas Feely is a former ICE Field Office Director for Buffalo, New York, and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Thomas. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Ainsley. Thanks for having me.
Well, what are your biggest concerns? You have so much experience with this. What are your concerns?
Well, just like the previous guest just stated, you know, a lot of people think it's just Mexicans or people from Central and South America that are coming across the border, and that's simply not true. A ton of terrorist people, people who are national security interests are coming across the border, and we just don't know who they are. We don't know where they're going or what they're up to. And I can tell you right now, I've talked to some people yesterday and this morning. Morale is at an all-time low, and it's just the people really need to be concerned about the border.
Yeah, the Border Patrol agents are completely overwhelmed. What are your friends down there on the border saying specifically?
They're overwhelmed. Like I said, morale is in the dirt. You know, they're trying to do the best job they can. Unfortunately, you know, love of country only goes so far. They know this administration doesn't have their back. They need more resources. And they're all asking, you know, why did we change what we were doing prior to January? This, you know, our security, Ainsley, shouldn't be a political issue, and this is really putting all Americans at risk.
What's your reaction to what Mayorkas has said? He says that he's proud of what's happening down on the border, what he's doing down there, and even if he could throw all of them out, he wouldn't.
It's bizarre. You know, here you have the Secretary of Homeland Security that's watching our border be overrun, and he's okay with it, and he's proud of it. Like he said, those are his words. You can't take them back. And it's just, you know, we see on TV the illegal aliens crossing the border, but what you're not seeing is the amount of drugs like fentanyl that are killing our kids and our brothers and our sisters, and it's rolling across the border. and it's sad that nobody wants to do anything in this administration.
How is this all going to play out in the next election? Because if you talk to some critics of Joe Biden, they feel like they're being taxed to death. They're being told what their kids are learning in school. They're being told they have to get vaccinated. They have to wear masks in schools. Yet these illegal immigrants who Joe Biden wants to put through college for free on your tax dollar dime, they just feel completely abandoned by the administration. How's this going to play out in the election?
You know, hopefully it plays out in some way, right? I mean, this really needs to stop being a Democrat and Republican issue and be an American issue. You're putting our lives at risk. You're putting our children's lives at risk. And we all know when our family members get killed by an illegal alien, nobody really cares until it's the right family. And this has got to stop. This has got to stop being a partisan issue. It's got to be taken seriously. The Democrats and Republicans, somebody please stand up for our country, secure the border, so we can take care of letting the people that need our help into the country. Because Ainsley, right now, the fact is, so many illegal aliens have entered the country since January. ICE ERO, who's in charge of finding these people and making sure they go to court, will never catch up.
What about Afghanistan? I mean, it's taken over by the Taliban. Are we worried? Should we be worried about Taliban trying to get through our southern border?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, one of the bases in New Jersey is where we're sending the Afghans to be vetted. And, you know, they came across terrorist individuals there that were, you know, of great concern to why they got here and how they got here. And I think the numbers were, out of all the Afghans that came into New Jersey, only 3% of all of them were actually translators and helping our government. So, you know, here we're just exporting horrible people into our country and turning a blind eye.
That is so scary, especially when we read reports. It's being reported that some of these refugees are being able to leave these bases or these posts and take Ubers and go out into the rest of the country.
Right, and you know, most Americans that I talk to, because I'm one of them, you know, we get it. People want to come to the country. We want them to do it the right way. You know, we have the Statue of Liberty. We'll help you with open arms, but we've got to have a way to stop people who don't belong here and that are only coming here to do us harm. We got to get them out of the country.
Thomas, thank you for all your service over the years and for coming on.
Thank you, Ainsley. God bless.
You're welcome. God bless you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilby. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click.
Now, isn't it ironic, my royal family, was the reason why I showed that video. Isn't it ironic how they show conflicting reports? Because they purposely were showing the Haitians crossing. Then they want to imply fentanyl. They're not even connected to any of that type of stuff. And in the end of that report, then they start telling somewhat of the truth. But now everything all of a sudden is heightened because of our Haitian brothers and sisters. And I'm going to tell you why I think they are vastly concerned about them coming over here. So I'm going to take that down, and we're going to continue on this journey. And we're going to get a little bit more updated now, because I wanted to kind of go back and then bring it into the present. Y'all ain't gonna like that mechanical voice, but this article was put out today and it's necessary to listen to.
President Joe Biden has instituted a mass expedited expulsion of Haitian and other black asylum seekers from the U.S. in one of the most aggressive deportations in recent history. Reports of plane loads of migrants forced to return to Haiti, evocative photographs of migrant camps at Del Rio, the Texas border town on the Rio Grande, and graphic images of black migrants pursued and rounded up by U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback, are exactly what the Biden campaign pledged to consign to the past when it promised to undo the moral and national shame of the previous administration. U.S. legal obligations to the specific class of immigrants called asylum seekers are derived from both international and domestic law. While there is not an obligation to grant asylum, U.S. law extends an opportunity to such persons for due process and a fair hearing. This article rehearses policy areas implicated in the conduct of asylum processing these last few years. These are the border administration practice called metering or queue management, and the COVID-19 era suspension of migrant rights under Title 42. It is clear that this set of novel routines, introduced as temporary adaptations for processing asylum seekers at ports of entry, have evolved into settled practices that contravene pre-existing obligations in law. Many asylum seekers experience these administrative innovations not as temporary aberrations, but but as insurmountable obstacles that deny them the opportunity to lodge asylum applications. Non-refoulement, the core principle of the Convention on the Status of Refugees, 1951, and its Protocol, 1967, is non-refoulement. It asserts that asylum seekers should not be returned to countries where they face serious threats to their life or freedom. The principle of non-refoulement is reiterated in the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, CAT, and the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, ICT. The U.S. Congress incorporated this definition into U.S. immigration law in the Refugee Act, 1980. It is this legal obligation that is contravened by the recent immigration policies. Metering is targeted mainly at Black asylum seekers. This practice began as a temporary queue management measure. Asserting a lack of resources to manage large numbers of asylum seekers at once, border officials at San Ysidro, California, began a practice of ticketing in 2016. The practice has been targeted mainly at Haitian and other Black asylum seekers. They are blocked from entry into the U.S. and expected to register onto a list on the Mexican side of the border. Subsequently, the Trump administration extended the practice across the southern border, guiding Customs and Border Protection, CBP, to physically block entry onto U.S. soil. Once ticketed, potential asylum seekers would only present themselves at the border when their number came up. In practice, as the process was managed by a motley of non-CBP organizations, there was no possibility of accountability, and CBP has not shown an interest in making this a fair process. This was a liminal status that built up into a lengthy backlog and that could stretch out into years, leaving people stuck in a dangerous limbo. Summary expulsions under Title 42 discriminate. This policy names a practice of summary expulsions that was initiated in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although ostensibly a public health measure, the policy is executed against the advice of medical professionals at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Given the continued high volume of traffic across the border through the pandemic, it also directly discriminates against asylum seekers who form only a small fraction of all human traffic at the border. Under the policy, a general block on land entry for immigrants was effected. These summary expulsions are a complete refusal of access to the immigration and asylum adjudication processes. In the context of the pandemic, the effect of these expulsions has been to force already vulnerable people into encampments and other unsanitary living conditions under which the spread of the virus would be intensified. It is this policy that the administration is using to expel Haitian and other Black asylum seekers, mostly Africans. Despite legal actions, Biden continues Trump policies. A federal court ruled in September that metering denied migrants due process, and yet the administration continued to use metering to process Black asylum seekers at Del Rio. There have been a number of legal action attempts over the legality of Title 42 policy. Immigrant justice organizations sued the Trump administration over the practice of Title 42 subjecting unaccompanied children to expulsion, which was successfully halted by a federal judge, who held that it violates the Trafficking Victims Protection Act and other laws. After the stay of order by a federal court in January 2021, the Biden administration amended the program to exempt unaccompanied children, which resulted in the exemption of unaccompanied children from expulsion as of November 2020. Similarly, groups who sued the Trump administration headed back to court to immediately halt the policy and eventually end the expulsion policy, which restricts immigration at the border based on unlawful invocation of the Public Health Service Act, which is stipulated under Title 42 of the U.S. Code. Despite the legal actions against this repressive policy, the Biden administration kept the policy in place for asylum-seeking families and single adults, although unaccompanied children are formally exempted from the policy. Beyond the moral arguments and ideological differences to be expected in wrestling with the knotted questions of immigration, advocates for migration justice understood President Biden's campaign's promises as a shift away from caprice and cruelty. While we have been under no illusion about Biden's position on enforcing immigration law in the ways previous Democratic administrations have, especially to the detriment and exclusion of Black migrants, there was, in our estimation, an expectation that asylum seekers would be protected. Instead, the Biden administration has not only continued some of the Trump policies, but has even gone as far as to challenge court decisions that have found these policies unjust. This column does not necessarily reflect the opinion of the Bureau of National Affairs Incorporated or its owners. Right for us, Author Guidelines author information. Nana Jayampi is the executive director of Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the largest Black-led racial justice and immigrant rights organization in the U.S. She is also the current president of the National Conference of Black Lawyers.
Well, my royal family, let me take this. What I wanted to say about this is that you keep hearing the same repetitive thing, that the Biden administration is picking. They're basically doing the same thing that Trump and them are doing. Ain't nothing no different, you know. Actually, it's even worse. In my view, based on my research last night, it is very despicable. But we will continue on. I'm trying to hold my tongue so we can get through these videos and audios. So I'm going to take this one down.
Information on thousands of migrants, most of them from Haiti, who camped out near a U.S. border crossing in South Texas last month. Many of them have made it through some of the most dangerous wilderness on this planet. The Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia is a jungle filled with wild animals, treacherous terrain, and armed criminals. CBS News has reported extensively from this area. Manuel Bojorquez is in Nicoli, Colombia, talking to migrants who are still just trying to get through. Manuel, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Gail. It is estimated some 16,000 migrants are waiting here in Colombia for a chance to cross this bay to get themselves one step closer to a stretch of jungle known as the Darien Gap. Many of them wait weeks camped out along this beach here. And word that the U.S. has recently deported nearly 7,000 Haitians is doing very little to stop them. A patchwork of tents has replaced the sunbathing tourists that once dotted the beaches of Nicoclí. Each spot along the Caribbean coast has made it the next stop for migrants heading north, like Charez Patrick. Where do you want to go? USA, the United States. That's his goal. He fled poverty and violence in Haiti 4 years ago, he says, only to find discrimination and little work in Chile. He has 2 daughters back home. A young woman and a girl. So everything you do is for them.
I want to change the life of my family.
You want to change their lives too. The shortest route from here to Panama is by boat, but that nation's government is only allowing 500 to cross a day, creating a bottleneck. There are clues here pointing to the hard journey ahead. They want these types of shoes because they know it's so dangerous out there, but they're expensive, so he's only sold 2 pairs so far. The danger is the Darien Gap, a 60-mile stretch of lawless jungle so treacherous at least 50 bodies have reportedly been found this year, but the real death toll is estimated to be 4 times higher. More than 88,000 have already crossed this year. Panama estimates 1 out of every 4 are children. Their roadmap is a network of WhatsApp groups with migrants sharing directions, tips, and warnings. But you won't go back.
No, go back.
No.
My dream is not back. My dream is...
Your dream is not back. Your dream is north.
No.
First, you must leave Nicoclí. Lionel Nelson, his wife, and his infant daughter are about to do just that, an attempt to cross the gap. That it's very difficult, that there are bandits, bandidos. But despite the danger, Nelson is determined to push ahead. We were with them as they waited and finally got a chance to board. Y aquí, a ver, ¿qué pasa? No sé, solo Dios sabe, only God knows. We followed Lionel and his family as they crossed and handed themselves over to smugglers on the other side to continue their journey. We'll have that part of the story for you tomorrow, right here on CBS Mornings. Tony?
Well,
boy, Manny, showing us the dangers of that journey and in doing so suggesting what dangers lay behind. What would you leave behind to do that? If that's your choice, Manny. Thank you very much. Look forward to that piece tomorrow.
Yeah, I will be making a point, my royal family, of, let's take this down. I will be making a point of, you know what? Oh, yeah. I see. I screwed up. This one was one that I went back on, so I'm gonna have to bring that to the present to y'all when I do another video on the Haitians and everything. So I'm not going to just report one story on this, but I will keep my word with y'all because I want to know what happened with that family. So let's continue on, my royal family. Now this is backtracking, but this audio that y'all gonna listen to really piss me off to the core.
The Biden administration is removing thousands of migrants from a makeshift camp in Del Rio, Texas. Roughly 10,000 migrants, many from Haiti, have been camped out there in squalid conditions since last week. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas visited the site today and pledged to ramp up removal and expulsion flights of arriving migrants.
If you come to the United States illegally, you will be returned. Your journey will not succeed, and you will be endangering your life and your family's lives. This is not the way to do it.
NPR's Joel Rose covers immigration and joins me now. Hi, Joel.
Hey, Layla.
So, Joel, the plan to expel these migrants in Del Rio rests on a controversial public health order that was put in place by the Trump administration. Can you remind us what that policy is?
Yeah, the policy is known as Title 42, named after a section of the U.S. Code that deals with public health. The Trump administration first invoked Title 42 back at the beginning of the pandemic. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said that immigration authorities could quickly expel any migrants they encountered at the U.S.-Mexico border in order to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Immigrant advocates say that's illegal and harmful to migrants. They argued the Trump administration was using the coronavirus pandemic as a pretext, basically an excuse to shut down the asylum system at the border, which the administration had been trying to do in various ways for years.
And yet, this policy has continued under the Biden administration, which promised a different approach.
Yes, although in a slightly modified form. The Biden administration did undo some of former President Trump's harshest policies, but at the same time, it has tried to strike a balance to deter migrants from coming to the border. And Title 42 kind of exemplifies this balancing act. The administration carved out exceptions for vulnerable migrants. For example, unaccompanied migrant children are allowed in, and parents and children arriving together have mostly been getting in to seek protection, but tens of thousands of single adults are being quickly expelled.
So bring us back to Del Rio. What does this mean here?
Well, Del Rio became a flashpoint because DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, was unprepared for so many migrants arriving all at once. But in another sense, it is typical of what's been happening at the border all year, with border crossing numbers near a 20-year high. And Del Rio shows why the Biden administration possibly has been so reluctant to give up Title 42, because this is the tool it's using to quickly remove some of these migrants from the U.S. and also to send a message to other migrants that they are likely to be sent back too.
So what's the reaction been so far to the administration removing people and sending people back to Haiti, still reeling from a massive earthquake and the assassination of its president?
Well, that's another thing that I would say is typical about Del Rio. The administration is getting blasted by critics on both the left and the right. Hardliners and some Republicans say the Biden administration is letting in too many migrants, which will in turn lead to even more chaos at the border. Meanwhile, immigrant advocates and some Democrats say the administration is abandoning vulnerable people and sending them back to Haiti at a time when, as you say, the country is reeling. Here's Lee Gallant from the ACLU, which has been fighting Title 42 in court across two administrations.
What people need to understand is that, yes, the Haiti situation in Del Rio is awful, but it's only the most recent dramatic illustration of what this Title 42 policy can do.
And there are ongoing legal challenges here, right?
That's right. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. ruled against the Biden administration last week, saying that Title 42 does not give immigration authorities the power to quickly expel migrant families. But the Biden administration quickly said it would appeal that ruling. So we are seeing this administration fighting in federal court to preserve one of the Trump administration's most hated border policies.
That's NPR's Joel Rose. Thank you, Joel.
You're welcome.
All right, my royal family. Let me take that down. Let me go back over here for a minute. Now, I was mentioning Title 42. Ain't nothing changed. They did slow it down, but every damn day they are sending the Haitians back. And let's not lose sight that there are some of them that has not been back in Haiti since the 90s and even possibly the 80s when AIDS had hit and stuff. So let's keep that in mind. So Trump and them was using Title 42, and the Biden administration is doing the same thing. And I'm trying to hold my tongue. We got this last update to watch, which was put up today. And then I'm going ahead and, say what I got to say.
That left thousands of Haitian migrants camped out beneath the Texas bridge. According to 3 officials, the U.S. knew back in July that thousands of Haitians were heading to the border. They say a failure to share intelligence, along with internal disagreements over deportations, and authorities were ill-equipped to deal with the situation. NBC News Justice correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now with more on this. So, Julia, first, let's give everyone a little background. These migrants came from a country that's going from crisis to crisis. Remind us how and why tens of thousands of Haitian migrants converged on the border last month and what happened to them.
Well, what's interesting about this group, Joe, is that they actually left Haiti, many cases years ago, many after the 2010 earthquake, and have been living in countries like Chile and Brazil and in other places in Central America. And they started to congregate to migrate north for a number of reasons. A lot of those countries there have been devastated economically and by the pandemic, and they started to see this as their chance to come to the United States. Now, the U.S., we've now learned, had that intelligence in July, and there were discussions in DHS about what to do about this group. Should they start ramping up deportations of Haitians already in the United States back to Haiti as a kind of deterrent? It was ultimately decided not to do that, especially after the August 14th earthquake, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake, riled the country, and they decided not to start deportations. Now, looking back at it, there's a review going on inside DHS. They're looking back and saying, look, maybe there were some decisions made along the way, also including intelligence sharing that could have prevented this mass number of people showing up all at once.
Yeah, Julia, let's talk more about your reporting. I mean, what do the officials you spoke with say was going on behind the scenes in the lead up to these events?
Well, it's interesting, Joe, not just looking back, but looking forward. So there seems to be a split within the administration over how to handle immigration. They want to be different from Trump. They obviously don't want to be nearly as draconian and harsh on immigrants as he was. But they also need to have some way to enforce the border when you're looking at people crossing in numbers not seen in 2 decades. So there was this dispute in July where they said, let's start ramping up deportations. If we can just deport 50 Haitians a day, that's enough to keep us from having to deport where we are now, 7,000 Haitians in under 2 weeks. So those were discussions. But ultimately, the more progressive side of that argument won, Joe, and they decided not to do that. And they halted deportations after the earthquake. Now we know they definitely ramped those back up after so many showed up in Del Rio. The intelligence, though, Joe, even though they said that they knew some people were coming, they said they had no idea that they would see 28,000 plus Haitian migrants arriving in one location, that being under that bridge in Del Rio, Texas. And that's something they want to do better going forward, too, to try to get more intelligence, oftentimes from getting inside the cartels, figuring out what their messaging strategy is, and trying to get resources to a location that might be overwhelmed like this in the future.
All right. And you can see more of Julia's exclusive reporting on NBCNews.com. Julia, as always, thank you.
All right, my royal family, let me take this down. I don't want no pop-ups and stuff. I wanted to make sure y'all get an update exactly what's going down. Like I was saying early before, they sending them away. They sending them away. Ain't shit changed whatsoever. Let's keep that on our frontal lobe. One thing that I wanted to point out is you don't see our folks abandoning our royal babies. You don't see that. Now, we did see the Mexicans. They abandoned their babies. You know, there was a few that was lost and stuff, but I didn't hear not one report of a lost black child or an abandoned black child. and stuff. And one of the reasons why I think there is a great deal of hyperbole, let's not lose sight that the Haitians continue to be punished for whooping the enemy's ass. And they do not want us intermingling with them. They cannot stop prophecy whatsoever. They're going to come here. Those islands are going to shut down. We're going to continue to have, weather patterns that are literally at biblical proportions and stuff. Those hurricanes and all of that. Remember what happened over in the Caribbean a very few short years ago. And it will be more and more and more and things like that. So I thought it was very necessary. Let's not lose sight of this, because sometimes, we'll report things, all of us will report it all at once, and then we'll go on to the next phase. Not over here on the True Royal Family or True Royal. And like I said, I'm going to keep my word with y'all. I slipped. I want to know what happened with that family. So there will be more over here that I will report because I want to know. And I do videos the way I like to envision videos and everything. So my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.